As a forensic pathologist, here's what I saw when Charlie Kirk was. The gushing blood points to a jugular vein injury. His arms pulling inward is very typical of decorticate posturing, which occurs usually during catastrophic brain damage.
The autopsy dropped, and the word is Charlie Kirk didn't even feel a thing. From the very second that hit landed, he was gone instantly. No time to scream, no time to fight, just lights out in a flash. That chilling detail alone has people saying this wasn't just some random tragedy, like this was an execution, plain and simple. Let's keep it real, because this kind of thing has a pattern. Yes, every assassination comes off sudden, but history shows us there are levels to how these stories play out. Take Dr. King back in Memphis, 1968. When that bullet struck, he didn't pass right away. He fought for hours in the hospital, giving a nation one last desperate window to hope, to pray, to believe maybe he'd make it. That fight stretched the pain, but also made the moment unforgettable. And think about Malcolm X in 1965. After being hit multiple times at the Audubon Ballroom, they rushed him to Columbia Presbyterian, and doctors worked on him, pushing hard before they had to call it. Those extra minutes mattered. They let people cling to the idea that survival was possible even when it wasn't. But with Charlie, there was no window, no fight, no chance, and just instant silence. Even Medgar Evers, struck down in front of his own home in Jackson back in 1963, still lived long enough to be rushed into an emergency room, still drawing breath when they carried him in. But Charlie Kirk? None of that. If the autopsy really confirms what insiders expect.
At 200 yards with a rifle, which is what would probably cause that, bullets don't just pass through the neck, they would fragment and destroy everything in their path. With that kind of injury, he would have lost consciousness within seconds and survived for less than a minute and probably felt nothing. Law enforcement always finds the shooter, and violence in response to speech is never justified.
Fatal trauma on impact, zero survivable window, then his case falls in that cold clinical category where a man drops exactly where he stands. No struggle, no breath, just gone. And that style of assassination says it all. It's about intent. This wasn't just a hit to silence him. This was about erasing every chance he might have had to push back. No final words, no iconic deathbed lines, no symbolic last stand. That precision made sure he didn't even get the dignity of a goodbye. And that's exactly why Candace Owens and Donald Trump are glued to this autopsy like hawks circling prey. If the report confirms instant death, they'll spin it as undeniable proof. Charlie wasn't just lost, he was targeted, eliminated before he could resist, before he could inspire with a single last breath. That framing is explosive because in a movement built on martyrdom, speed becomes the message. He wasn't given the chance to linger like legends before him. He was cut down on the spot, and that makes the narrative hit harder. And Candace? She wasted no time letting the world know where she stood.
People that are telling me at just within 48 hours before Charlie passed away, his top Jewish donors were pulling funding from him, demanding that Charlie take their name off of the building that they had donated to Turning Point. I guess I can figure out who that is, how many people could have donated a building. And then once Charlie was killed, they said, never mind, put it back on the building. Okay? Charlie himself had alluded to a tremendous loss of money coming in.
On her podcast, she didn't use words like tragically lost or gone too soon. No, she said flat out Charlie Kirk was executed in broad daylight, and she didn't stop there. And she dragged anybody she felt was spinning the story for clout. Her tone wasn't grief-stricken, it was furious. She admitted she cried, something she says she never does, but then flipped straight into fire mode. She accused political leaders and media voices of twisting Charlie's legacy into propaganda, and even called out one big-name leader directly, accusing him of faking loyalty while misrepresenting Charlie's final letter to make it seem like Kirk died as his pawn. Soldier for his country! You already know exactly who Candace was hinting at, Mike, and she even said she didn't want to be on somebody's hit list for saying it out loud, but Owens wasn't pulling any punches either. In her words, Charlie Kirk had been under relentless pressure, cornered by billionaires, donors, and power players furious over his willingness to give a mic to dissenting voices. And that pressure, she warned, was boiling over right before his death like a storm about to break.
And we'll speak about that more. More people are going to come out with information. This is all inevitable, okay? And I'll also point you in this direction. You guys remember Bibi recently was on a PR blitz, despite the fact that he was, fighting this 96,000 front war because it do nothing, okay? He was doing a ton of podcasts in America He went on to Patrick Bet-David's podcast. He went on to Brandon Tatum's podcast. He went on to the Nelk Boys podcast. Anybody find it weird he didn't do Charlie Kirk?
Then came Trump, swooping into the conversation the way only Trump can. His public statements leaned hard into martyrdom, making Charlie's death part of the same saga as his own brushes with danger. They tried to take me out. They took him out, they'll try again. That was the vibe. In Trump's telling, Charlie wasn't just a fallen ally, he became another brick in the MAGA wall of persecution. And the visuals from his camp only poured gasoline on the flames. Charlie's face flanked by US and Israeli flags splashed everywhere, feeding the conspiracy buzz Candace herself had already stoked. Suddenly, the narrative split into a wild double feature in real time. On one side, Candace giving us raw, emotional framing of Kirk's final days as a man under siege, hinting that his refusal to bend may have sealed his fate. On the other side, Trump inflating Charlie into a movement symbol, a rallying cry for every patriot who feels constantly under attack. And between them, their voices drowned out almost every other conservative trying to offer a measured take. And the media?
I can tell you he didn't work alone on the internet, because it seems that he became radicalized on the internet. That's just by watching same things that you're watching and hearing. It looks like he became radicalized over the internet. And it seems like he has wonderful parents, brought in a wonderful neighborhood, smart guy, great boards, great marks, great student.
Mainstream outlets mostly highlighted Erica Kirk's widow's speech, powerful, somber words about not letting Charlie's mission die. But on social media, it was Candace's fiery clips that went viral, her accusations and her vow to expose anyone who even thought about sliding into Charlie's chair. That's the moment timelines exploded. Candace wasn't just mourning a friend, she was planting a flag, marking territory, and daring anyone, donor, ally, or politician to challenge her as the self-proclaimed keeper of Charlie's legacy. It was like watching a spin war break out in real time. Trump elevating Kirk as a martyr for MAGA, Candace reframing him as a martyr for truth and the people, while everyone else was left to sort through grief laced with conspiracy vibes and unanswered questions. But here's where the blogs really caught fire. The whispers about whether Charlie Kirk's death was just random tragedy or had bigger fingerprints all over it. And sis, the theory that refuses to die is the one that says Charlie crossed the wrong people. I already said their names, but from here on, we'll call them that blue country in the Middle East. For years, Charlie was one of their loudest defenders. You couldn't catch him on a stage without hearing him hype up their government, their policies, their special relationship with America.
And then something happened to him over a fairly short period of time. It looks like he was radicalized over the internet, and it's radicalized on the left. He's a left. I have a lot of problems with the left, and they get protected, and they shouldn't be protected. But as you understand, I think very well from the tone of your question. Thank you very much.
He fundraised alongside them, stood shoulder to shoulder with their biggest lobbyists, and defended them fiercely on college campuses. He was a golden boy for the cause, the one they could count on every time. But about a year ago, the tone began to shift. It wasn't loud at first, just subtle cracks showing through. Instead of full-throated praise, he started asking sharper, riskier questions. Instead of parroting the talking points, he started platforming guests who weren't 100% in line with the narrative of that blue country in the Middle East. And that's when people started whispering, had Charlie stepped off the path far enough to make himself a problem? The moment Charlie Kirk started switching up his tone, everything changed. For years, his loyalty was unquestioned. You knew exactly what he was going to say on stage, at rallies, or behind a mic. He was that guy, the dependable hype man, the golden boy who echoed the message of that blue country in the Middle East without hesitation. Lobbyists trusted him, politicians funded him, college donors lined up behind him, but then came the shift. A small at first, so subtle most people didn't even clock it. Yet for the people watching closely, that shift looked like the opening crack in the wall, and cracks always spread.
Let me ask you, in the conflict of versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children.
But let's
futile.
Let's hear it out.
There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for innocent populations, and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but
It's not a point; it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk.
Charlie began questioning things in ways that set off alarm bells. Instead of just defending every move that Blue Country made, he started asking why certain American dollars were flowing overseas at the expense of homegrown issues. Instead of blasting anyone who dared to critique their government, he started inviting those critics onto his platforms. That was unheard of. One of the biggest defenders of their cause suddenly giving airtime to voices that didn't toe the line. That's the kind of move that turns allies into enemies real fast. And let's be real. In politics, it doesn't take a direct betrayal to make powerful people nervous. All it takes is hesitation, a pause in the script, a question that wasn't supposed to be asked. Because when someone like Charlie, with a massive base of young followers, starts planting doubts, those doubts spread fast. For lobbyists and billionaire donors, that's dangerous. They weren't investing in Charlie to see him get curious. They were investing in him to be consistent. That's why this shift became the centerpiece of conspiracy chatter after his death. The theory isn't just that Charlie was silenced, it's that he was silenced before he could go too far off script. Social media lit up with screenshots of past speeches, clips of his recent interviews, and side-by-side comparisons of his old full support quotes versus his newer, sharper questions. People were stitching TikToks, captioning Twitter threads, and digging through podcast archives like amateur detectives, building the case that Charlie was drifting away from the establishment that once boosted him. And here's where it got really wild. Bloggers began dropping alleged donor leaks. Names tied to massive checks supposedly pulled back in the last year. Insiders hinting that fundraising dinners were getting tense. Some even claimed Charlie walked away from a private meeting after refusing to water down his criticism. Nobody could confirm those leaks for sure, but online, confirmation didn't matter. The vibe alone was enough to make people believe he had crossed someone important. Candace Owens latched onto that narrative like a hawk spotting prey. On her podcast, she didn't mince words. She said point blank Charlie had been cornered by billionaires and donors furious about his independence. In her framing, his death wasn't random, it was the tragic climax of a man refusing to bend. That's why her rants hit so hard online. She wasn't just grieving, she was building a storyline. She was painting Charlie as the man who broke ranks, who started pulling back the curtain, and who paid the price for it. Meanwhile, Trump's camp leaned into their own version of the story. Instead of highlighting Charlie's shift away from certain alliances, they amplified his loyalty to Trump himself. In their framing, Charlie wasn't silenced for questioning global power players. He was silenced because he was part of Trump's movement, another victim of persecution. Their spin made Charlie less of a political defector and more of a patriotic soldier cut down in the fight. That split in narratives only fueled more confusion, and where confusion thrives, conspiracy goes viral. Blogs feasted on it. Some posted entire timelines mapping out Charlie's evolution, showing how he went from cheerleader to critic in less than a year. Others speculated about secret meetings, claiming he had gotten too close to journalists and researchers who weren't afraid to call out the Blue Country's influence in American politics. One post even alleged that Charlie was preparing a keynote speech that would have been his boldest break yet, a speech that never got delivered. Was that true? Nobody knows, but the idea alone set the internet on fire, and the reactions weren't limited to the political class. Ordinary fans felt betrayed too, not by Charlie, but by the idea he might have been silenced for telling the truth. Comment sections flooded with people writing things like, "They knew he was waking us up," and "He didn't die, he was taken." That raw anger turned grief into suspicion, and suspicion into a movement of its own. TikTok edits with ominous music, Instagram reels with flashing headlines, and YouTube breakdowns dissecting every word of Charlie's last months. They all started trending, giving the theory legs far beyond political junkies. But the flip side? Critics pushed back hard. Some said Charlie's shift was exaggerated, that he was still broadly aligned with his old allies, just choosing sharper language to get clicks. Others accused Candace of hijacking grief to settle her own grudges, turning Charlie's death into a platform for her ongoing battles. And mainstream outlets? They mostly sidestepped the conspiracy angle, focusing instead on tributes, Erica Kirk's widow's speech, and Charlie's legacy as a conservative youth leader. That created another divide between polished coverage on TV and raw speculation online. The gap only made the rumors look more believable to people already distrustful of the media. The craziest part is how this narrative keeps mutating. For some, Charlie's shift was about money, billionaires pulling strings and silencing him for stepping out of line. For others, it was geopolitical. A global power play from that blue country in the Middle East, punishing a loyal soldier who dared to question the script. And for others still, it was symbolic, proof that anyone who challenges the machine, no matter how powerful they look, can be cut down instantly. In all versions, the same thread runs through. Charlie's death wasn't just loss, it was punishment. And that's why this theory refuses to die. It taps into anger at billionaires, mistrust of foreign influence, and the feeling that powerful people will go to extremes to protect their interests. Whether true or not, it makes sense to people already skeptical of authority. And once something makes sense, it doesn't need evidence to spread. So now, every time a new detail drops, and whether it's from the autopsy, a leaked text, or a clip from his last speeches, it gets folded back into the same storyline. Charlie Kirk crossed the wrong people, and the price was his life. And until someone delivers ironclad proof that his death was purely random, that conspiracy is gonna live on, fueling hashtags, sparking fights in comment sections, and keeping Charlie's name alive as both a victim and a symbol. And if you know anything about politics, you already know even a hairline crack in the armor can look like full-blown betrayal. Fast forward to just days before his death. Charlie Kirk sat down with Ben Shapiro, and word on the blogs is that conversation turned icy. He wasn't doing his usual softball talk. He pressed harder than normal, firing off pointed questions about policy, about influence, about who really benefits from the billions America keeps shipping overseas. Looking back now, that interview feels eerie, almost like a piece of foreshadowing. Folks are replaying the clip saying, yep, that's the moment he signed his own check. In their eyes, Charlie wasn't just breaking ranks, he was publicly challenging the very system that built him up, and that's the kind of move that makes powerful people twitchy. Here's where Candace Owens' podcast slides straight into the conspiracy lane. She claimed Charlie was under heavy pressure from billionaires and donors, the same people who didn't want him cracking that door open at 2 and 2. And the internet is saying those donors weren't just wealthy Americans, they were big-time allies of that blue country in the Middle East. If Charlie really was about to pivot away from the lockstep loyalty that made him such a prized voice, that shift would make him dangerous to the very hands that fed him. History isn't clean here either. Plenty of voices who've criticized that region claim they got smeared, deplatformed, or cut off from funding. The narrative online is brutal. Speak too loud against them, and there's a price. And in Charlie's case, some are whispering that the price wasn't just losing donors, it was ending up 6 feet under, silenced before the pivot could go public. The spotlight didn't take long to shift. After the autopsy whispers, after Candace and Trump carved their competing narratives, eyes turned to one person who hadn't even asked for the stage. Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow. And let's be real, in tragedies like this, the family always ends up caught in the middle, whether they like it or not. Mainstream media painted Erica in soft tones. Her speech at the memorial was looped on television, framed as the moment of grace amid chaos. She spoke about not letting Charlie's mission die, about carrying the torch even in grief. It was emotional, powerful, and polished. The kind of clip networks could run without controversy. But online, that's where the real storm brewed. On social platforms, people weren't satisfied with polished words. Some voices amplified her as the heartbroken widow trying to hold her family together while the world spun out of control. But others, they went straight for suspicion. Every pause in her speech, every flicker of her expression, every gap in her social media posts became evidence for the conspiracy crowd. Comment sections filled with lines like, "Why does she look too calm?" or "Why hasn't she posted more?" For the internet detectives, silence wasn't grief, it was guilt. Whispers spread that Erica might have known more than she was letting on. Some conspiracy threads accused her of protecting the same donors Candace claimed were putting Charlie under pressure. Others went darker, suggesting she was caught between loyalty to her husband and loyalty to unseen power players. None of it was backed by proof, but proof didn't matter in the age of viral suspicion. The narrative was juicier when Erica was cast as a potential insider, the woman who knew too much but stayed quiet. Adding fuel, sources close to the family leaked that Charlie's parents had quietly cut off direct contact with Erica, choosing instead to speak through intermediaries. That revelation lit up timelines instantly. To some, it was just a grieving family struggling with fractured relationships, but to conspiracy theorists, it was the smoking gun. If his own parents didn't trust her, they argued maybe she wasn't the innocent widow the media painted her to be. Of course, Erica's own relatives stepped forward in her defense. They insisted she was being unfairly vilified, that she was simply a widow crushed by loss and retreating from the spotlight for her own sanity. They said her quiet public presence wasn't a confession of guilt, it was heartbreak in real time. But try telling that to the internet. In the social media court, silence is suspicious and sympathy is always overshadowed by scandal. The division grew sharper with every headline. On one side, Erica was the grieving widow who deserved space and compassion. On the other, she was cast as a figure wrapped in secrets, possibly tied to the very pressure Candace and others hinted had been closing in on Charlie. That split didn't just reflect how people saw her, it reflected the entire fracture in the movement Charlie left behind. Because make no mistake, this wasn't just about Erica. It was about the vacuum Charlie's death created. Candace was marking territory, Trump was claiming a martyr, donors were scrambling to control narratives, and Erica, whether she wanted to or not, became the symbol people projected their suspicions onto. In that chaos, every tear she shed and every word she didn't say became part of the story. And as the storm raged online, one truth became crystal clear. Erica Kirk couldn't win. If she spoke too much, critics said she was deflecting. If she stayed silent, they said she was hiding. If she smiled, it was too soon. If she cried, it was too rehearsed. In the end, she wasn't just grieving her husband, she was battling the world's microscope, a widow turned unwilling character in the very conspiracy playbook that swallowed her husband's legacy. Now, I'm not saying this theory is proven fact, but look at the timeline. A year of Charlie dropping subtle critiques, that tense sit-down with Ben Shapiro, Candace screaming about billionaire pressure on her podcast, and then boom, Charlie gone instantly. No fight, no last words, no final stand. That's why the streets keep asking, was this just random violence or was it a warning shot to anybody else daring to break ranks? Step back for a second because history teaches us something chilling. Sometimes the real danger isn't the enemy outside, it's betrayal from the inside. And that whisper haunts the whole Charlie Kirk story. Not just who pulled the trigger, but who had the most to gain once he was out of the picture. Think about it. Charlie wasn't just another activist. He was a brand, a movement, a multi-million-dollar machine called Turning Point USA, propped up by donors and billionaires with Charlie sitting as the golden boy at the center. You remove him from the board and suddenly there's a vacuum, an empty throne, a chair everybody claims to honor, but plenty of folks secretly want to sit in. And Candace Owens? She said it straight. Her warning about people sliding into Charlie's chair wasn't metaphor. It was a shot fired at anyone circling the throne. Because she knows the game. Politics is cutthroat. One day, you're the voice of the youth. The next, your so-called allies are rehearsing your eulogy while lining up to replace you. And if that sounds dramatic, remember, Julius Caesar's end didn't come from strangers. It came from the very senators he thought had his back. Betrayal has been part of power since the beginning of time. So the real Judas question here is this: who benefits most from Charlie's silence? The donors who allegedly thought he was straying off script? The conservative influencers who spent years chasing his spotlight? Or maybe the political heavyweights who'd rather absorb his energy into their brand than risk him breaking away? I'm not saying his inner circle plotted his demise, but the internet sure noticed how fast the vultures started circling. Leadership at Turning Point already talking continuity. Other MAGA voices stepping up with tributes that read a little too much like resumes. And the loudest of them all, Candace herself, swearing she'll guard Charlie's legacy while staking her claim as the one who knew the real Charlie best. But here's the twist, sis. What if it wasn't Judas at all? What if there was no grand scheme, no billionaire plot, no shadowy allies? What if this really was just one man, one act, one split second of violence with no conspiracy strings attached? Even if that's the truth, it might not matter. Because in today's world, perception is reality. And Candace, Trump, and the movement already locked the narrative in as an execution. Once that story catches fire, the facts don't stand a chance against it. So what do you think? Was Charlie Kirk a victim of random violence, or was he silenced to keep him from breaking ranks? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you're still with me, subscribe for more deep dives, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you on the next one.